Simje, Namje, Namra, Lama, La, Japso, Chiva, Sangye, La, Japso, Chiva, Chela, Japso, Chiva, Gide, La, Japso, Chiva, Chumde, De, Shin, Shepa, Trashumba, Yanda, Bra, Zobe, Sangye, Shai, Jatuba, La, Chaza, La, Doje, Nimba, Ramdo, Jamba, La, Chaza, Rinche, Vetra, La, Chaza, La, Nuwange, Japa, La, Chaza, La, Bawe, De, La, Chaza, La, Panje, La, Chaza, La, Rinche, Me, La, Chaza, La, Rinche, Dave, La, Chaza, La, Tongwani, La, Chaza, La, Rinche, Dawa, La, Chaza, La, Chima, Me, Ba, La, Chaza, Peche, La, Chaza, La, Samba, La, Chaza, La, Sambe, Chin, La, Chaza, La, Chula, La, Chaza, La, Chule, La, Chaza, Azan, La, Chaza, La, Zendemba, La, Chaza, La, Sije, Kaye, La, Chaza, La, Yeba, La, Chaza, La, Nyenge, Mebe, Ba, La, Chaza, La, Sime, Gebo, La, Chaza, La, Meka, Ba, La, Chaza, La, Nishe, Sheba, Zambe, Yese, Namba, Reba, Nyumbra, Jemba, La, Chaza, La, Nishe, Sheba, Bebe, Yese, Namba, Reba, Nyumbra, Jemba, La, Chaza, La, Namba, La, Chaza, La, Jembe, Ba, La, Chaza, La, Simba, Shinda, Yongra, La, Chaza, La, Omba, Toge, Jasenge, Jamba, La, Chaza, La, Shinda, Nambra, Nebe, Ba, La, Chaza, La, Yule, Shinda, Nambra, Jawa, La, Chaza, La, Nambra, Nebe, Sheba, La, Chaza, La, Pune, Nawa, Gebe, Ba, La, Chaza, La, Rinche, Bema, Nambra, Nemba, La, Chaza, La, Tishin, Sheba, Jajamba, Yanda, Bra, Zobe, Sanje, Rinpoche, Bema, La, Rabdo, Sheba, Rewange, Gebo, La, Chaza, La, Teta, La, Soba, Juju, Jitenge, Kambam, Jena, Tishin, Sheba, Jajamba, Yanda, Bra, Zobe, Sanje, Chumdende, Kanjin, Yinji, Shute, Soshin, Shebe, Sanje, Chumdende, Teta, Tamje, Tala, Gonso, So, Dage, Gewa, Deda, Gewa, Toma, Na, Tama, Mashe, Bani, Kurwana, Kurwe, Jene, Tamje, Do, Nipe, Leje, Badan, Jido, Sawa, Dan, Jibala, Jiso, Yirawam, Chidenge, Koram, Gidenge, Koram, Chuju, Gidenge, Kotro, Bada, Chodo, Sawa, Dan, Chobala, Jiso, Yirawam, Sama, Jiba, Maye, Leje, Badan, Jido, Sawa, Dan, Jibala, Jiso, Yirawam, Gewa, Shuye, Leje, Lamyan, Nabra, Nambala, Shubada, Jula, Zawada, Jubala, Jiso, Yirawam, Leje, Deba, Kange, Dene, Nasim, Jenyawa, Shivam, Dere, Jene, So, Chivam, Iraje, Yudo, Chivam, Yuda, Kudo, Chivam, Lalo, Chivam, Mase, Rimbo, Namso, Chivam, Ombo, Masawa, Chivam, Tawa, Lopra, Simbra, Chivam, Sanje, Chumala, Nyebra, Mijeba, Jurve, Leje, Deba, Kalamba, Deda, Tamje, Sanje, Chumdende, Ishi, So, Jurva, Chinda, Jurva, Panda, Jurva, Simra, Jurva, Chimba, Simba, Deda, Ge, Chimra, Tola, Shasa, Mechaba, Mibeda, Leje, Janje, Nambra, Jeda, So, Sanje, Chumdende, Deda, Tamje, Dala, Konso, So, Nage, Jawa, Deda, Jawa, Toma, Tama, Machi, Bane, Kurwana, Kurwe, Jawa, Shinda, Shiba, Dana, Jure, Jene, So, Shiba, La, Sekan, Chikam, Zawe, Gewe, Zawa, Kana, Bana, Nage, Sujin, Samwe, Gewe, Zawa, Kana, Bana, Nage, Sambra, Shiba, La, Niki, Gewe, Zawa, Kana, Bana, Nage, Simje, Yonsa, Mimra, Jibe, Gewe, Zawa, Kana, Bana, Nage, Chancho, Shota, Simje, Gewe, Zawa, Kana, Bana, Nage, Lana, Meba, Ishije, Gewe, Zawa, Kana, Bana, Deda, Tamje, Chito, Nije, Dobe, Dobe, Lana, Maje, Bana, Bona, Maje, Bana, Gome, Ya, Goma, Lame, Ya, Lama, Yoso, Moe, Lana, Meba, Yanda, Prazobe, Chancho, Do, Yoso, Moe, Jiwa, Jidra, Debe, Sanje, Chumdende, Namje, Yoso, Moe, Shida, Majube, Sanje, Chumdende, Namje, Yoso, Moe, Jiwa, Shida, Dada, Jume, Sanje, Chumdende, Namje, Yoso, Moe, Siva, Dishinda, Nage, Yoso, Moe, Jiwa, Diba, Namje, Ne, Suso, Shasa, Sena, Namje, La, so ira mo sanje tam je la gu je so wa ni so da ge la na me ba yi shi je jo na ba to bra ju je me jo ja wa ga na da da shu ba na ka da de ba da da ti se ka ma ju yu de ma ba da ye je so da ge na ta mo ja wa ji de ja so ni ra je le ne no ba so ma ge no ba shi da na ma ya yi je no so ma mi ge chu bo so so sha ma me ne da de ba mi ge chu na sa me ma sim ne ni ma wa ju ni ba tam je sham ra je do sha she da ni ma wa ge ne le da ma da de se ye ye ya ni ba da ge je ba se se le da tam je da ge so so sha sa me ma ba da ge ni ba na ka ge me se wa ge che ba ye do wa sha ba de de me de da ma le yo so ja wa ju ro da da sim je kun je ti pe le ni ba ju ga mo je sha ba le je nam yo je ba mo je je le ge je ba de do si je sho sha za wa da chu je sha ba za je so ye ra mo je so wa ge wa chu se da ge je so ba tam je da ge ja jo je mo sanje kun la cha za la ra so la me de ba ye cha jo se ma nam la ya ni de nam la cha za ni ro tam je do je je do re ram ne ram de na ba je me ba ni je ba cha jo se ma cha za la sim je wang do je be na da ge de ba je je ma sanje chen ra chen ne so da ge de da sha pra je da le nam ba sum wa ge sa na so ne je ba de da ge kun je sa be de da ge cha je me se cho cho da ge je na so san ge che ba kan jo wa san ge che be ye ra wa de la da ne ye ra de ba tam je sha ba je sa na kun la ye ra san ge kun la cha za la da ne ye she cho do cho cho da ge cha na so sa cho da la ne ba ye cha cho se ba cha cho cho san ge je ba kun ma de cha cho da ba san ge je de da je be de so cha kun la me le do che je pa la ba ge je che ma chen ba da ye ne do ma sim je do je jo pa ba che wa sam ye so chu de ze je shu de de be nam do jin jo je se be se ba nam je ma che wa ku je jin da la pa ni cha na se so sim je jin ma je ba la san je nam ne me me se sim je nam la chang do je se be so le jo zo be san je ma je na pa da de da ma je ba de da je so da lo je chang je je ba je je pa ro chen da zo je ne zho zhe sim je da ye mo je zhe ba mo je ne la me chang je re zhe je ma je pa da me je na ra je ma je ne ma je nam re ma je ne ma je dong be je ne da bra san je zhang zo je ba da sim je ma je so ma je pa sa ma je so ma je da ma je ba ye je da je da se da gre sim ba ye ma ba kun la me ne sim je kun la me le do se na ma je je do je ma ba ma bra ma je be da ye no je ro do je ma ba tam je nam je be je be pa ro je sim je su je 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 su je nam bra da da de lo se me be su je su je pa ro je do je sa ya na chu me lo ge kun da me ne se ba cho ma je be se be pa ro je do je sun je sam be sun je je da ma je ma de be sun je pa ro je do je ma da be de se da pa ra ro be de se da lo je da be de se je sam de pa ro je do je nam pra ta be ko san da de sa nya pa ye do yo re sa ngo sa ye pa ye che ra pa ro je do je sa je kun je ma ba ta ve da si je pa ro da san je sim be se je je da ye sam ba zo je je de da che ba che je je cham ba da da de pa ye pa ro chen da zo je ne sa je pa la ra ne jo je be se na ma me je nya wa ye na de de la ma ye ne nge le na ta do pa je ne ja wa cham be ko ba ni jo je nya wa cham ba ta ne sing ge ye ma wa san ye ze ba de be ze da ja cham jo jo la ne jo ta ma me be lo ya temprasho, gewa diye tsera tamche do, tato shinye sama tempada, simche kunje dunga kurje ne, chambe dela chawa che paraisho. Dage Zhangzhou Zheba Lan Zheba Namba Zamba Ye Gewa Kante Zheba Ge Zhangzhou Zhela Zheba Zhou Zhena Kunda Leda Zen Dunga Neba Jin Deda Dage Senam Je Dega Jazo Dobra Zhou Deda Korwa Jise Da Namya Dele Nyama Zhou Zhove Zhangzhou Semba Ye Dewa Jime Zheda Zhou Jide Kanda Nyawa Da Kanda Jinye Ye Deda Dene Meje Na Dejen Deve Kawa Zhou Changwe Nyamda Chodo Zhou Zhangzhou Sembe Zhenjele Zhongwe Chuo Taye Je Sawe Nyamda Sewa Zhou Rangje Lome Na Sayang Dela Zende Na Do Zhou Shama Leye Dambo Yang Pasan Shindo Chomba Zhou Tere Murba Dada Ngamba Na Shezo Genye Jibe Zedro Je Pema Chezo Chenden Chodan Ye Nyawe Sajo Dane Nyambra Zhou Sobo Deya Rinje Pumbra Zhou Sase Sheje Sashe Dawa Zhou Deja Rewa Namja Chepa Ye Shame Kanjo Deshe Gaura Zhou Dama Dose Senje Cherpa Dan Dene Sonde Meto Chepa Penze Seje Deba Deya Dene Seje Meto Pembra Zhou Zhou Rame Meta Jana Shewa Da Shake Sheje Rega Meta Kunde Do Dage Give Tabje Na Ye Ludo Ne Namo Namda Leche Taje Bande Zhou Cheche Dene Shinje Meta Kada Shake Mese Namra Che Kone Musa Dega Jebe Tuzan Dego Suye Tunyamde Chendo Dena Namge Jena Chana Doje Marwa Shutone Rabdo Gawe Shuje Dega Chane Deda Leche Dobash Meto Shaba Pecho Tangde Baba Ye Nyame Meta Sheche Seba Tongjurde Lobra Deve Semba Deje Samba Na Semya Namge Chana Bema Tongwash Boda Jeba Bola Rimba Sujo Bete Dode Kange Tuye Dunga Kunda Gawe Shuje La Chowa Kunde Yonjo Chancho Semda Tsewa Jijo Shene Serba Jemba Jemba Mebra Jemba Jishe Shuje La Je Chebe Nage Shabje Pema La Shuje Tuje Leje Ula Meda Deme Soje Chababa Kaze Yuwa Lama Tonga Deya Chode Dede She Chayan Deja Tone Tange Semya Chacho Demrash Dedra Dagi Gize Kondo Samba So Chacho Semba Jibla Mejen Dewa Seje Jeje Ngede Charwa Bebdone Semje Nyawa Deda Mamba Gajuro Eje Tujo None Chila Je Save Jika Chawa Jo Chame Yilpe Vishendo Ida Namne Dewa Hokwa Jire Sewa Ye Chane Babe Vijende Ida Namne Simje Je Chuje Tato Sewa Mawa Namye Soto Je Upe Tato Jate Jo Namo Jitra Jishendo Juma Nime Sawa Shibo Namye Kweta Cheba Namye Seta Kumba Namye Shuda Tongwa Shibo Dobra Cheba Namye Nata Nyanye Nyamda Gato Ije Namya Yisu Tempa Bezo Sobra Semje Neba Shinye Nyudo Nene Hajo Brave Nene Maneva Tato Juma Mebra Chaba Namne Jime Sho Jimba Namne Java Jo Tambe Namne Tende Je Penze Semne Nyendro Chaba Namne Tamje La Chana Tamje Devra Jo Kange Denda Joje Ba Debe Mege Joje Joda Joje Shubana Yila Samba Joje Shuye Mozo Derje Ne Nyeda Lenje Kaura Jo Nyama Lamba Chambana Chaba Dada Jeje Chungge Daso Jigme Ma Minga De La Tongwa Sho Gursa Lame Nyama Wa Chiba Gembo Geme Yelo Nyeshe Ramye Na Mada Songwa Chebra Mida Kunle Tarwa Na Dena Shera Zende Seda Sheba Punzo Ne Dado Sera Chebra tamje namba zushe do longje cheba me brajo zeba me je tseme barawa dune je brajo semje sije chuma ba de da sije je brajo ba de jenga sunge ba so za be za za brajo jide burme chinye ba de da je ba ni je je mara na me to do je ma je da ja je brajo da ge sunam de ne semje tamje ma le ba de ba tamje ba me ne da da ge wa je brajo chang zhe sem da me zhe xie zhang zhe zhe la zhe wa na san jie nam jie yo so xie de ge le jia bo wa sem jie de da tam jie ne zhen ya ba me le wa xie da do de ge su ji re xie qu yue zha ya zha ma ba san xin ge jin me ze san jie dan ne san jie zi quan jie zhou bei gong wa ye quan nan tam jie gong wa tam jie de de san xie da sem ma da sa me ba da la de da nya be zhe ye ran xie jian bo ne zhe jie guan jie jian guo ye guo ya chang zhe sen ba mong bo rang ye le be sa de da jian bra zi be xue zhe jie be jie guan jie zha da ne xin da we se tam jie nan ba le ya qi jie zha jun me xie ba de bra xue de da da de san jie se da zhe qi be jian bo da ye be zhe we la ma xue ba xue la ya de so xia be xie lo do
Now you can all hear me, right? So I will continue. At the end, we have to recite the offering type practice. So I thought I'd resume a little bit earlier. Now, what I'd like to speak about next is the politics of the period. what the politics of the period of original Buddhism were. So when you speak about this in terms of the politics, during the latter half of the Buddha's life, the king of Magadha was Ajatashatru. So Ajatashatru had seized power by imprisoning his father, and so he had done these bad deeds. But he later became a very intelligent, wise king who gained control over many regions of central India and solidified Magadha's political power. Then several generations after him, there was a minister. And this minister's name was this. Is Susanaga. And so the minister's name is Susanaga. So he took power, and that was the beginning of the Susanaga dynasty. So this is another dynasty in Magadha, but it disintegrated quickly. And then another dynasty called the Nanda dynasty. And this dynasty also took control over many parts of India and had a fair degree of military strength. But it only held control for around 25 years. And after 25 years, this kingdom of Nanda disintegrated. Then there was the Greek king Alexander the Great, the very well-known Greek emperor, who invaded northwest India and several areas of northwest India. First he invaded, and later he withdrew his troops. First he invaded and he arrived, and then he withdrew his troops. And so if I'd just show you this this map. So this is the map. When he came from, so Nanda was in this region, right? So Alexander's realm included all these lands. So when he came in, so he first came in this way. He came in this route and then entered in the areas of India. Then he withdrew when he went back. First he invaded, and then he withdrew his troops. And after he'd reviewed his troops, in 323 BCE, Alexander died at the location of Babylon. And since he had passed away, he couldn't continue invading India. So India did not come under Greek control. So if Greece had been able to take control over all of India, then there would have been a danger that there would have been a great harm to the spread of Buddhism. So now the Indians were invading India, and at the same time, there was a king called Chandragupta. So he was the first king in the Maurya dynasty. So when he was young, he gathered an army and he brought down the Nanda dynasty. And the reason is that at the same time at the time that there was a foreign invader, he also took that enmity to overthrow the Nanda dynasty. And then he continued to lead his armies into the northwest India. And there was still a little bit of Greek a little bit of Greek power left in northwest India. He eliminated it all, and he was able to take control over about half of India. So if you look at this, you will immediately see. So these are some images, paintings of Alexander's invasion of India. It was probably something like that. So this is a situation during the time of Chandragupta. So he basically took control over about half of India. So that's it. And then later the next the Maurya dynasty became stronger and stronger. The kings of Magadha and so the strength of Magadha grew stronger and stronger. It's not listening to what I want it to do. So this is it. This is the map of the Magadha becoming larger. It's the one on this side, right? This is the one. This is, if you look at this, first you see the Magadha was at first only a small country, and then it grew to be a larger and larger country. It gradually became a larger kingdom. So this is how it occurred. So that is how it was. In any case, the Emperor Chandragupta took control over half of India and established the Maurya dynasty. And he reigned for 24 years. Following him, here's his son, Bindusara, who reigned for over 28 years. And his son was the Emperor Ashoka. Now, he probably came to power around 268 BCE. So I'd like to give a brief introduction to Ashoka's life. And the reason is not only was his reign very close to the spread of original Buddhism, but during the time of Emperor Ashoka, there were the split into the two root basic schools or factions, but there were not the 18 sub-schools. And so at that time, Buddhism was still close to its original form. So for researching original Buddhism, the research into Ashoka is a very important question. Now, the name of Ashoka means sorrow-free, no sorrow or no suffering. This is the meaning of the name Ashoka. Now, the time when Ashoka became emperor was somewhere around 270 BCE. So sometime around, and so he probably reigned somewhere around 268 BC until the 232 BC. Now, how do we know when Ashoka reigned? is that there are the inscriptions on the pillars and rocks that Ashoka had inscribed throughout his empire. And so there are these inscriptions that we can still see. And so one of these edicts, what is written, is that it mentions 5 kings in the west at the time of Ashoka's reign. And so based on the dates of those 5 kings, we can then estimate the time of Ashoka's reign. And generally, when we talk about Ashoka's inscriptions, he writes that 1 year after I came to the throne, or 10 years after I came after the throne, he writes that, but he doesn't write exactly what year he came to the throne. And so for this, how can we know what year he ascended to the throne? It's because at that time there were the 5 kings in the western, and so it's at the same time as he became emperor, and so these are written on the inscriptions. And so if we look at the dates of the 5 kings in the west, then we can know when it was that Ashoka ascended to the throne. Now, during the time of King Ashoka, he didn't just rule India, he also sent messengers and ambassadors to neighboring countries. And those neighboring countries at that time included Syria and Egypt, and Macedonia, and other 5 kings. So he writes the names of 5 of these kings. So you can see the names of the kings here. The names of the kings are written here. These are the colored names. These are the names of the kings of Egypt and Syria, Macedonia, and so forth. And so because we know the dates of those kings, we can calculate the date when Ashoka took power. Now, what I was mentioning before is that he spread Buddhism not only in India, but he also spread Buddhism to the neighboring countries around India. For example, at that time, the size of the area where Ashoka spread Buddhism was this large of a place. So this is India here, right? So he's in this huge area, he spread Buddhism. The reason is that he sent ambassadors to other countries in order to spread Buddhism. He sent his own representatives or ambassadors to spread Buddhism in these countries. In particular, if we look at the inscriptions, he would send his ambassadors for about 4 or 5 years. Now, in the areas of Central Asia, and so the Buddhism spread through many areas of Central Asia at that time. So Buddhism at that time in the world, one of the reasons we can say it is the largest religion in the world is the influence of Ashoka. Worked very hard to spread it to many different areas of the world, not just in Asia, but it also made its way over to European countries. In any case, we don't know exactly the dates when Ashoka rose to the throne. It's difficult to say it happened on this date in particular, but depending on how you look, there are discrepancies in the calculations, but there can't be larger than between 2 or 10 years, because if we're calculating based on the dates of the other kings, then there's some difference. And so there can't be much of a difference. There's a range of between 2 and 10 years. And so for that reason, there's not a whole lot of difference when you're thinking about the reign of Ashoka. Now, this reign of Ashoka was an extremely important period in Indian history, whether think about Indian history in general or the history of Buddhism. And also, it's also important for calculating the dates of Buddhism. And so if you ask, how long did Ashoka reign? There's also the Sri Lankan history called the Mahavamsa. This says that Ashoka reigned for 36 years. There's also the Purana, which is like the Indian history text. But of course, it's mixed in with many myths and so forth. But in any case, it also says there that he reigned for 36 years. Like, now, if we need to research the reign of Ashoka, then the first thing is we need to the primary source is the inscriptions on the pillars, and then after that, the stories of Sri Lanka, the Mahavamsa. There's also a text called the Samantapasadika. And in terms of the northern Buddhist traditions, we have the life of Ashoka, the Parinirvana Sutra, and the Divyavadana, and many other texts in the northern tradition. And if we look at all of these, then we can come to a much more complete research into the reign of Ashoka. Now, what's traditionally said is that when Ashoka was young, he was actually very cruel. He was a very cruel and hard person. He killed many people. Later, he went for refuge to Buddhism and began to rule as a Dharma king. And so for that reason, he was called Dharma King Ashoka. So when we look at the inscriptions on the pillars that were built by Ashoka, it was only about 7 years after he ascended to the throne that he finally became Buddhist and took the lay precepts, as it is explained in those inscriptions. Now, when he had become Buddhist, within about 2 years, he probably didn't have that much interest in Buddhism. Now, after he had been on the throne for 8 years, he went to wage war in the region of Kalinga. He'd seen how many innocent people were slaughtered in the war. And he saw how people were taken prisoner and exiled. And they're separated from their parents and their children, how spouses were separated from each other. And we saw these terrible, horrific things. He realized how wrong, how evil waging war is, and he realized how terrible it was. And he thought to himself that in the past I had reached power through destructive, violent means, but I didn't really actually achieve true victory through that. But the actual victory is the Dharma Vijaya. This is the ultimate victory. The Dharma victory is the ultimate victory. Victory through violence is not actually a victory. So then 1 year later than that, not only he began to actually stay with this Sangha, and he actually worked hard to practice the Dharma. And he strived very hard at his Dharma practice, and at that time, so 10 years after he had ascended to the throne, what the texts write, he said that he achieved Sambodhi. And so Sambodhi means, it's that he achieved the 3 enlightenments. Now, there are many different explanations of saying that he achieved the 3 enlightenments. They don't understand exactly what it means. So there are 2 different explanations of it. So one of these is so that it means that Ashoka saw the truth. He saw the nature, the nature of things as they are. He saw the truth. And some people say that is that after that the Buddha had traveled to the place where the Buddha achieved enlightenment, and so for that reason he says the word Sambodhi. In any case, Ashoka later began to make pilgrimages to the Buddhist sites. He called these Dhammayatras, so Dharma pilgrimages. And he went to visit the most important sacred sites. He went himself. And 20 years after he achieved enlightenment, he built the Ashokan pillar at Lumbini. And so this is inscribed on the pillar in Lumbini. So he went to the throne around that time. In any case, on the pillar in Lumbini, it writes that he erected the pillar 20 years after he ascended to the throne. Now, 12 years after Ashoka had ascended to the throne, he had the Dharma that he'd realized or experienced. He'd been studying to the Dharma. He had there's the understanding he had and the experience he had. And he wanted to spread this throughout India in general. He wanted to publicize it. And this, what he did is not in order, not just for the people of that time, but the people of future generations to be able to see the Dharma. He ordered that they be inscribed in rock. This left a really great trace, because if King Ashoka had not written these on rock, then we would have nothing left to see. So then forget about the year of the Buddha's birth. So nowadays we can get kind of a rough idea of when the Buddha was born, right? We've gone to a lot of, so we've come to an era where there's basically not a whole lot of difference, but more than 100 or 200 years in the dates of the Buddha's birth. But if we didn't have the inscriptions of Ashoka, then there would probably be 1,000 years of differences in the differences between the dates of the Buddha. It would be difficult for it to be like it is now. We're all kind of converging on a single range of dates. And so for that reason, Ashoka had showed a great foresight and had these inscriptions carved in rock, and this was very important. Now, he had originally had the plans until he had been on the throne for 27 years. He didn't stop doing this work of making inscriptions in rock. Now, the rock inscriptions are primarily like these. They're these large rocks, these big boulders, and they'd smooth the surface, and then they'd write inscriptions in them. These are called the rock edicts. Now, there are two different sizes. This one I'm showing you now is a larger one. This is one of the major rock edicts. Likewise, there's also a sandstone, and it had polished them and set them in like a shape of a pillar, make like a pillar, and he'd write the inscriptions on those. And these are called the pillar inscriptions or the pillar edicts. So one is on rock, and the other is written on pillars. And so I'll show those later. Now, in terms of the rock edicts, there are two different sizes. The larger ones were inscribed at areas such as Girnar, that in the border regions of India. They found 7 of these. So they found 7 major rock inscriptions there. And so within these 7 major rock edicts, I don't need to mention that. Now, what I'm showing now are some of the minor rock edicts. When you say minor rock edict, they found 70 of these in locations in central and southern India. And they described generally how Ashoka practiced the true Dharma and so forth. Primarily, they have inscriptions that are closely related to Buddhism, and in particular, there's a place called Bairat. This is this place. This is the site that I'm showing you now. And in this, he has an inscription where he talks about the 7 gateways to the Dharma. Now, if we speak about the pillars, there are 2 sizes of pillars, the larger and the smaller. There are larger and smaller pillars. The larger pillars have been found in 6 locations in central India. And these primarily speak about points connected with Buddhism. Now, the minor pillars, or the smaller pillars, are such as in Sarnath and Sanchi. There's a Sanchi stupa that's very well known, right? So these are found at the ruins of Buddhist sites such as Sanchi and Sarnath. And so what's written in this is that it's giving edicts saying that the Sangha may not split into factions. So these are edicts that were given to the Buddhist Sangha. It's saying that you're not allowed to become disharmonious and split into factions. And so this is what he wrote in those edicts. And in particular, as I mentioned the other day, these pillars have, especially those minor ones, have many different animals, particularly the one in India, the one in Sarnath was found with the 4 lines facing in 4 different directions, and above them there was the wheel of the Dharma. And so later, when this became the symbol of India, when India achieved liberation or independence. So this the 4-line capital. So when were these inscriptions found, or the pillars found? They were gradually found over the course of the 19th century. And even in the 20th century, there are some pillars that were also discovered. Like I said, in 1949, in a place in Afghanistan, they found a pillar there. In 1958, they found another inscription in a region of in another area of Afghanistan that had inscriptions in both Greek and in another language. Likewise, in 1966, there's the capital of New Delhi, right? So in the area of New Delhi, they found a new rock edict of Emperor Ashoka. So basically, even during the 20th century, they probably found around 30 in the 20th century. So they've discovered around 30 inscriptions. Now the inscriptions are in very old scripts. So at the beginning, people couldn't read them, but in 1837, there was a man named James Prinsep, and he researched these inscriptions and was able to decipher the inscriptions. And then from that point, this is very beneficial in the research into the inscriptions on the pillars. And they basically became able to read the inscriptions. However, they have not been able to decipher completely all of the inscriptions on the pillars 100%. So what I'm showing you here now, above are the letters. On the other side is Buddha. This is a letter written. These are letters written during the time of Ashoka. So it's on the left side, and then on this side, this is what's written here. This is Buddha written during the time of Ashoka, and these letters say Shakyamuni, written in the script of that time. And here we have someone riding on a chariot. What this is a carving on the stupa in the Sanchi stupa. And so within the carvings, there is a carving of King Ashoka. It's an image of Ashoka. So the Sanchi stupa was first built by King Ashoka, and then it was increased or changed or restored by later kings. And so the present form of it is as was built by later kings. Now this shows where the inscriptions, the rock edicts, and so forth of Ashoka are found. They're all over, aren't they? Because at that time, the kingdom was really huge. This is Afghanistan, Pakistan, and quite a bit there. So I don't need to explain this in detail. At that time, King Ashoka himself, what his intent was, is that the Dharma that he and all the sentient beings should respect is based on the foundation that all people are fundamentally equal. It also speaks about the conduct that Fisu such as you must be loving to all living creatures, and you have to speak truth. You have to have a very broad-minded attitude and meditate on patience. You also need to offer protection to the deprived and unfortunately. And so this shows how important he considered being loving. Likewise, he also said that you have to respect all living creatures, and you must not kill undecently. And even if you have to kill an animal, like some sentient beings might be pregnant, or nursing creatures, those are not allowed to be killed. Likewise, during the time of Emperor Ashoka, he established hospitals both for humans and for animals. It was a very early time, but he made hospitals for humans to go to, and he made hospitals for animals. Likewise, he also planted many trees and plants. And since people need drinking water, he built wells. Likewise, he built buildings by the side of, or pavilions by the side of the road for people to rest. And within those, he made places to get water to drink. So when people were traveling from one country to another, they would be able to rest. And so he did many things to make people and animals happy and healthy. He also, over and over again, spoke about how we have to offer service to parents and elders. He said that this is good to do. And that we also have to be prostrate and be polite to elders. We have to take care of our friends and acquaintances and Brahmins and shamans and spiritualists and poor and servants. We have to practice them, do them in an appropriate way. We shouldn't disdain them. And so this shows the Emperor Ashoka's high regard for the freedom and for the comfort of all sentient beings and for human rights. He also said that we have to be generosity to the poor and to spiritual practitioners and Brahmins. He's encouraged this highly. Likewise, also in India, there was a tradition of kings going hunting, and he put a stop to that, and he himself stopped hunting and so forth. He also instituted pilgrimages, or Dhammayatra, and went on pilgrimages to sacred sites of the teachers of various religions. And so instead, he instituted this tradition of pilgrimage. And likewise, not only was he generous in material ways, he was also practiced generosity of dharma. And basically, he was striving to relieve the suffering both of body and of mind. He was very generous, and at the same time, he was very generous. He also explained people they need to be content and have few. He said that they need to only have a few things, and only keep a few things, and not hoard too much. In brief, he advised people to have few desires and be content with what they have. And all of this is described in his rock inscriptions. Now, King Ashoka was also someone who was very diligent and someone who also really worked very hard. So whether he was eating food or was in the Queen's palace or when he was enjoying himself in a park, if anyone had a request about some situation in the empire, anyone could make the request or give him the news. If he was a king who didn't have much interest in governing, and then he'd say, "Oh, I'm enjoying myself. Why are you coming to bother me?" He wasn't like that. You could make requests at any time. Or also, what the king said is that governing in accord with the Dharma is the king's responsibility for the people. He also said to bring benefit to the world is the king's responsibility. The efforts that I do as a king, he said, are like ways to repay the karmic debts to all sentient beings. All the sentient beings in the past have treated me well in the past, so I need to repay their gratitude, as he said. He also said that all sentient beings were his children. So these do appear. Such words do appear. Also, in order for the Dharma to remain for a long time, 13 years after he ascended to the throne, Ashoka offered that Dharma Mahamatra, and I'm not sure if this name Dharma Mahamatra is the rank of a minister or the name of a particular minister, but in brief, what it means is that the ministers every 5 years would have to travel around the entire empire and give Dharma advice to the people. And this is a way to make sure that the Dharma would long remain in the emperor. Likewise, once Ashoka became Buddhist, he went for refuge to the Buddha, and became a Buddhist, but he also had a very equal religion to all the religions. If we look at the edicts inscribed in the rocks and pillars, the emperor said they made offerings of various kinds to all the teachers or prasada of all the religions. He also wrote in the edicts, "May all religions remain in all the regions." Likewise, during the time of King of Ashoka, he also had a minister, especially for the Buddhist Sangha, and he also had a minister for the Brahmas and the non-Buddhists, and he also had a minister for the Jain. Like, for example, we have the Department of Religious Affairs. And so you have one minister for the Buddhism, one for the Hindus, one for the Brahmanas, then one from the Jain religion. And so you have these different, he divided the responsibility among various ministers. And what this shows is that he viewed all religions equally. However, he himself was a Buddhist. This is clearly indicated in the inscriptions. And so the becoming a Buddhist happened around 7 years after he ascended to the throne, as described in the pillar edicts. Now, when we hear the his stories, it often talks about Ashoka building stupas. Now, when we research this in the inscriptions on the pillars, it mentions that he built a kona kamana, but it doesn't otherwise describe it. But there is a sutra of Ashoka that was translated into Chinese in the 6th century. And what it says in the sutra is that the Emperor Ashoka built 84,000 stupas for the relatives of the Buddha, and that this benefited many sentient beings. And it also says that at that time, at the encouragement of his great Buddhist minister Upagupta, he, at the sacred sites of the Buddha, King Ashoka went to these places on pilgrimage, and he built temples in all of them. It also mentions how he built stupas for Shariputra and Maudgalyana, according to the sutra. Likewise, during the time of Faxian and Xuanzang, it's written that there were these stupas of Shariputra and Maudgalyana. Now, at that time, there are only ruins left. But it was said at that time that they were built by Ashoka, and so they heard this, which was frequently said in India at that time. Likewise, when archaeologists researched these stupas that were built by Ashoka for Shariputra and Madhyana, they say that most of them they could identify them as having been built during the time of Ashoka. And so for that reason, we can say that the Buddha built many stupas for the relics of the Buddha and also for the relics of the great arhats. So basically, first of all, Ashoka became Buddhist, and then he spread the Dharma. And he performed great deeds and activity on the behalf of Dharma. I think if there hadn't been an Emperor Ashoka, then Buddhism probably would have been difficult for Buddhism to spread very widely. So when we call Ashoka the Dharma king, this is one reason why he was so well known by this name of the Dharma king Ashoka. Now, Emperor Ashoka had paid great respect to the Sangha because he was someone who actually practiced Dharma and who put the Dharma to practice, and so he understood how important it was, and so he supported the Sangha. And in supporting the Sangha also became very prosperous. They had a good position, they had a very good livelihood, and so the Sangha itself actually, when they became very prosperous, and within they began to get a little bit corrupt from the inside. They got worse and worse. They began to get worse. And so with all the generosity he gave to the Sangha, it also harmed the finances of the empire. And so if we look at the Sutra of Ashoka, in the latter half of Emperor Ashoka's life, his princes and ministers he lost the power of this to them, and they didn't give him any opportunity to practice generosity to the Sangha. They didn't give him any authority to do that. They stopped him giving authority to give to the Sangha. And in the very end, he had an amra fruit in his hand, and he wasn't able to give it to them. And if he couldn't give anything, even that, much less anything else. And if we look at the way this is said, that during the second half of Ashoka's reign, he became a very poor position. He had lost all of his power to his ministers and so forth, and he didn't have much actual power at that time. In any case, when we look at how it was, after Ashoka passed away, the Maurya dynasty immediately lost its power and fell apart. And so during the time of Ashoka, the Maurya dynasty was a very powerful and large empire. But after him, his son was probably not all that skilled, and it immediately fell apart. And so that is the topic of the Emperor Ashoka. So next year, I'll continue in speaking with the division into the 18 schools, the development of the Mahayana, and the origins of the secret mantra of Vajrayana. So I'll continue with that next year. Now, some people have spoken about making a mandala offerings. So if you want to make an offering, you should prepare. I'm not going to recite anything more than just a short mandala, but you should get ready. Now, after we've done the mandala offering, they say that after the mandala has been offered, then there will be a speech on the behalf of the people listening to the teachings. So that will be right after the mandala offering. So I'm going to recite the mandala offering. Now, I think the person who is giving the talk may begin speaking. The embodiment of the activity of all the Buddhas of the three times, the Lord who protects all sentient beings, our incomparable protector and refuge, the 17th holder of the incarnations of the Karmapa, Ujun Chulnid Dorje. I prostrate with great respect of body, speech, and mind to his stainless feet. And at the same time, at this occasion of the completion of the Ngok summer teachings, in order to express the gratitude of the monasteries and nunneries in India, Nepal, and Bhutan, I've been asked to speak about my own experience and feelings. And also some of the opinions of here in the Rimtak Monastery. So I'd like to speak about a few of these impressions and experiences of listening to these teachings. So since I need to speak as a representative of all the monasteries and nunneries of India, Nepal, and Bhutan from yesterday evening until today, I have contacted all the monasteries and nunneries about their opinions and their experiences. I've also spoken with the people connected to the Dharma centers and also to a few of the monasteries in Tibet, and I've compiled all of their opinions, and so I'd like to share a compilation of their opinions, and at the same time, during this time when the Gyawan Karmapa has been giving us this profound teaching to their Ngok summer teachings, all of the members of the Sangha, young and old, have had felt a very strong feeling. They felt a great need and a great joy. And many say that this has just been an amazing teaching, one that they more than they expected, something that they cannot even describe, no matter whether they are educated or new students. They all feel that this has been extremely beneficial to them and their lives, their minds. And so the main point here, the essence of it, is in this teaching now. The His Holiness has been speaking about the research that many modern researchers have done into the ancient Indian history and Indian of Buddhism. This is compiling the research, and likewise, it's not just the research of Western researchers, but in addition, His Holiness has used his own particular intelligence and brought out the essential points of the teachings and taught them in this way. And so they're all based on authentic manuscripts, such as the scriptures in Pali. And so for this reason, it's been extremely beneficial for all of their minds and has been a very informative experience. Not only that, it speaks about how our Buddha looked with his intelligence, looked at the way with the five types of intelligence and looked at and taught the Wheel of Dharma, but we didn't. This is traditionally taught, but we didn't actually think about the situation and the place and the time that he turned the Wheel of Dharma. Up to this point, within Buddhism, we had never heard anything so detailed about this. Likewise, when you think about the indigenous peoples of the Indian subcontinent, and also the original religions and how they developed and how the civilizations developed. And then gradually how the Brahmanical religion, the original religions and the new religions, and how there's such a great development in philosophy. The Buddha has had at this exact perfect time to turn the wheel of Dharma and teach the Dharma. And so because of this history of how the Buddha turned the wheel of Dharma, His Holiness is able to really bring out the special, amazing qualities of the Buddha. Likewise, with another area of interest for all of us, we often speak about the positions of the non-Buddhist and Hindu schools, but we have not known the background history or the situation of them. And so we're basically just repeating the tenets, but we don't actually recognize the real subtle points of them. And so now, with His Holiness speaking about the development of ancient Indian religions and philosophy has been extremely beneficial. So in the future, all the Shedras, the Shaikashitas, His Holiness should continue to, if he can continue to speak about the non-Buddhist philosophies, then this will be extremely beneficial for understanding the philosophy and coming to a much better understanding of the view. Now, these days, and if in the future there were a class about these non-Buddhist philosophies and this research in shadows, this would also be very beneficial, as some people have expressed an opinion. Likewise, His Holiness also spoke about his Buddha's initial intention in going forth from home to homelessness. In the middle, how he underwent such incredible hardships and austerities. And in the end, how he gave up the two extremes of asceticism and luxury and found the true middle path, and how he thought before he turned the wheel of Dharma. And even while he was turning the wheel of Dharma, even though there was at that time in India such a great difference in caste in India of that time, he turned the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings all over of all castes. And His Holiness also spoke about how the extraordinary students of the Buddha appeared, and how even at the point where he's about to pass it in nirvana, the Buddha spoke again and again, asking people for questions, and showed his love and concern for his students. And by hearing this history and story, for many people in Tibet, many people felt like this brought a really great big change in their thinking. So people who previously had a very sort of hard and firm views, it changed the way they think. And so for that reason, this thinking, from this way of speaking about the Brahmana origins, is something that had never been heard, that they never thought about in the Tibetan traditions as a really a new knowledge that they gained. Likewise, when we usually speak about the life story of the Buddha, we speak about all of the miraculous events and about flying into the air and burrowing into the ground. Much as that is spoken about these days, when we think about these days, there are many people who think religion is false, and people consider science is important. And in this time when people are such interested in studying that, or the primary aspect of this teaching to be how our teacher, the perfect Buddha, had the unbiased loving kindness and compassion for all sentient beings, with actually no regard for caste or clan, how he turned the Dharma for all sentient beings, and how His Holiness emphasized the Buddha's compassion and prajna and wisdom in teaching the Dharma. This is something that's beneficial not only for the followers of the students, this is also something that people in all over the world, and in the West, in Europe, and America, and all over the world, have found very beneficial and helpful, and very something that fits very well with their current ways of teaching and explaining things. And so, in brief, this teaching of this year, whether we're smart or foolish, or whether we're old or young, the way His Holiness has taught the teaching is extremely vast and extremely profound, and in particular, is very detailed and showing things in terms of the Pali and other language. It's something that everyone can accept. And so everyone is very delighted and happy that this has really moved us in our minds. And so this is the mine opinion that we all hear. Likewise, many people in Tibet say that up to this point, they've just seen His Holiness' teachings, but they've never really heard him teach. And so in the past few years, when His Holiness has been abroad, they've worried in their minds, what could possibly have happened to His Holiness? So last year, during the Kaju Gunsha and during the springing teachings, and now this Ngok summer teaching, now they have some sort of this excitement and confidence in their mind about what the karma is, who the karma is. This is not just in the karma, and not just the karmapa. And they feel that they have no doubt that it's something held bring great peace and happiness to the entire world. And so they say it's like Mikyo Dorje has once again appeared on this earth, and that we're seeing the unfolding of Mikyo Dorje's life. This is giving everyone a greater courage and inspiration than before. And so these are the opinions that I've heard from people in Tibet. And so I'd like to ask His Holiness to look upon us with great compassion, loving us in a way that we can, since we have achieved the teachings in a way that befits us and fits with the way we think in these present days. We've received this now well. So all the representative of all the monasteries in India, Nepal, and Bhutan, all the Dharma centers, all of the monasteries in Tibet, we would like to say from the bottom of our heart, would offer like of our deep thank yous. Likewise, everyone's hope is that this Ngok Summer teachings can continue without interruption, so that His Holiness can please continue to turn the wheel of Dharma. For example, we have the Kaju Gunsha. All the shadows gather in the Shenra during everyone gathers together to the Kaju Molam, and during these Ani, all the nunneries gather in the Arya Chima gathering. And so now in the future, if there's also some way for all the monasteries to gather, then this is would be very good. And so there are also people who have expressed this opinion. No, there's also. And so another point is the hope of everyone in Rumtek is everyone can swiftly return to India and set foot in Rumtek Monastery. They've all asked me to express this request and wish. We ask to make the prayer that His Holiness live for hundreds of albums, and that may be able to accomplish his wishes without obstruction or delay, and that he may be able to travel to all parts of the world, including Rumtek Monastery, and continually turn the wheel of Dharma. So we'd like to make this prayer, encouraging His Holiness to do so. And so that through the like express our wish that because of making this prayer, that His Holiness live long and be able to benefit all sentient beings and bring happiness to the world. You said quite a bit. So I don't need to say much more. So it's been almost a month that I've been speaking. So there's really nothing else I have left to say. But there's one point I would like to say. So during just about the last month, I have talked quite a bit to all of you. So what is most important if we think about that? The words of the Buddha. The treatise is written by the followers. The scriptures by all the great masters. It is important for us to preserve all those that are left and protect them and to spread them. This is extremely important. I think we can all recognize this now. In the past, I have expressed my hopes. And so now the words of the Buddha have now been put in the Adarsha website. You can all watch them. And the tenure has basically been completed. So now what we need to do is to compile all of the complete works of the Tibetan masters and put them in the Adarsha. And so we need to gather all of the works of all the great Karma Kansan masters who we can find in particular and put them in the Adarsha website. Now, as I said the other day on my birthday, I think we need to, in the future, we need to expand the treasury of Kaju instruction so that we can have the complete instructions of all 4 classes of tantras, so that it includes not just the Karma Kamsan, but also the secret mantra practices of all the Dapo Kaju lineages and all of their rituals, and so that we can, if we can include as many of their practices for which we have the sources and the transitions. And so those I mentioned, but I have many other plans, of course, but I don't need to explain them right now. So I think it's important for everyone to take some interest in this. Because when we look at it, like we can do anything, it's fine. We can do whatever we want. It's spontaneous without effort. But if we think about the future generations, whether the future generations have such an opportunity depends on what we do to preserve the scriptures now. And so we now, for the sake of future generations, must have the broad intention and make sure to preserve all the important scriptures. If we can put more effort of body, speech, and mind into this, I think this is good. Otherwise, if we are kind of like ancient Indian history, even if we want to know about many ancient history or many different situations, there's no way we can learn about them. And it's like a very bad situation, nothing we can do. So the future generations have to undergo we have to do what we can so the future generations do not have to undergo the same difficulties as we ourselves go. So now, so now the point is I'm going to make sure that I can continue this Ngok summer teachings, and continue that next year. And so then we'll think about whether there can be an autumn teachings. We're also getting close to the winter teachings. So as I said before, during the winter, we have the Kaju Gunshe, there's the Kaju Munlam. So this year, because of the epidemic, it's difficult for us to all gather in person, but perhaps it's possible that we'll be able to hold them in our own monasteries and nunneries. We can do as much as we can as before. In addition, and at the same time, I have the wish to prepare as much Dharma, the Dharma that I need to teach. Now, actually, the Khenpos need to discuss about what is best and what's most appropriate for me to teach. So the Khenpos will discuss this, and then I have some thoughts of my own, and so gradually think that now I haven't much else to say. So that's how it is. So thank you. So now we'll have the prayers. We'll do the closing prayers from the teachings, the dedication of merit.
Jai
벗은 샤. 되네 투셔 숭아이다. 까망이의 벗은 샤.